illegal deals, Hungarian safehouses, and cold-blooded murder. When international businessman and drug lord Tyler Pratt offered his investment to a young man's business, he had no idea that this would backfire and end in his death. And the man on the other end of the gun was his business associate and his politically attached triplet girlfriend. However, their crimes failed to go according to plan when they were unable to murder a witness, leading the two to flee the country and spark a 3-month international manhunt. But their adventure, which included them holding themselves up in a safe house, would end in their humiliating capture. And even after that, more surprises would be unearthed in the courtroom. So, who is Tyler Pratt? What witness was left barely alive after his murder? Why did Oliver Karafa gun both of them down? And who precisely is Lucy Lee? Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and this story sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood script. When the daughter of a high-profile businesswoman decided to marry a local thug, it sparked the beginning of a very vicious duo that would do anything for money. But the truth is that both of these assailants had their own dark secrets, as did the victims too, in fact. By the way, Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories, so if that does sound like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. Thank you. Anyway, you know the drill by now, so please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Tyler Pratt. Welcome back to Canada, folks. Today, we're zoning in on the city of Hamilton, found in the province of Ontario. Now, Hamilton is known for its local arts, culture and culinary scenes, all of which are surrounded by its beautiful nature trails. I hear this part of Canada has the perfect blend of both city and nature, and with a population of 580,000 residents, it is not too crowded while not being overly lonely either. Found on the western bay of Lake Ontario, Hamilton is a port city specializing in engineering and manufacturing. In fact, did you know that more than 60% of Canada's steel is produced here? Google Maps shows how industrial the city has become, with various rail and sea networks set up to distribute products which are made here. Travel to the east of Hamilton and you'll come across the small town of Stony Creek, which is also filled with plenty of warehouses. And one of these warehouses, this one in particular, will become crucial in our case today, because on February the 28th, 2021, a sudden deathly commotion here interrupted the evening air. It was shortly after 7:15 p.m. that the Hamilton Police Service responded to a shooting that occurred on Arvin Avenue within Stony Creek. That was when a passerby found a 26-year-old female crawling on the concrete floor beside her vehicle. It appeared that she had suffered severe injuries, including a gunshot wound to the chest. And although she was alive, it was clear that she was in grave condition. After making a call to the authorities, officers found another victim nearby, that being a 39-year-old male named Tyler Pratt. And tragically, he had already passed away from multiple gunshot wounds. It was obvious that armed assailants had targeted both of these victims. Officers quickly believed that the suspects must have fled the scene in a white Range Rover SUV, and so they requested anyone in the local area to come forward should they have any helpful information. The news was sure to send shockwaves throughout the local community, and it was soon learned that both of these victims, named Tyler Pratt and Jordyn Romano, were a couple. The two had been in a relationship for a little bit over a year at the time of the attack, and apparently were absolutely inseparable. And although Jordyn survived the shooting, she now faced the enormous challenge of living alone without Tyler. We all know what it's like to be freshly in love, and these two not only lived together, but they shared their entire lives with each other. And now, she was all alone. To add to her grief, she was also 13 weeks pregnant with his child, which tragically was now lost due to being shot. Now, we'll go into more detail in a short while, but it is worth highlighting here that both Jordyn and Tyler were into some rather shady business at the time of the shooting. However, it is also worth mentioning that both of them were trying to get better for their child. So, it became quite evident that whoever had shot Jordyn and Tyler had clearly intended to murder both of them. However, with them failing with Jordyn's death, it became possible that she could find justice if she remembered their faces. But saying that, there was one problem with this idea. You see, Jordyn, she had slipped into a coma. Jordyn spent 3 days in a coma fighting for her life. Her parents and friends were warned that she might not even make it, but thankfully her strength persevered. Emerging with painful scars, nerve damage in her leg and her breast, and an inability to move without assistance, she luckily woke up with full memory of what had happened. And it turns out she even knew who her assassins were. The two who gunned Chris and Jordyn down were actually business associates. Ones that Chris had personally lent money to help them float their business. And it seems that, instead of paying them back, they opted to murder both of them instead. With that said, the authorities learned that their names were Lucy Lee and Oliver Karafa. With the knowledge that Jordyn survived the attack, Oliver and Lucy were now nowhere to be found. In fact, they had actually already fled the country and made their way to Eastern Europe. But before we understand what happened between these two couples, let's first understand who precisely they were. So, without any further ado, let's dive into the world of this mysterious couple known as Lucy Lee and Oliver Karafa. Right, so let's begin with Lucy. Yunlu Lee, better known by friends and family as Lucy, was a 25-year-old woman who grew up in Toronto. Lucy is also a triplet, with one of her sisters even being a contestant in last year's Miss World Toronto contest. Also known as the Mia triplets, there are actually tons of photos of them online together, where Lucy, Jane and Kaylin often posed in swimwear and gave Q&As to their many fans. Anyway, it's safe to say here that Lucy had a very comfortable lifestyle and was looked after by her mother and her two sisters. She was quite extraordinarily wealthy. As for Oliver Karafa, there isn't much to say about this lowlife. At the time this crime took place, Oliver was 28 years old, and although he was initially from Slovakia, he made the move to Toronto with his parents Maria and Wojtek. Unfortunately, his only known history is not pleasant either, because in 2014 he made national news for all of the wrong reasons. It was 10 years ago that Oliver was found guilty of impaired driving, causing death, driving while over the legal limit of alcohol, criminal negligence causing death, and dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing death. As a result of being found guilty of all of these charges, he was sentenced to a measly 5 years in prison. The conviction stemmed from a crash which happened in April of 2012, where Oliver drunkenly got behind the wheel and drove at almost 3 times the speed limit. As a result, he crashed his car, causing his friend and passenger, 19-year-old David Chang, to be ejected through the windscreen, and tragically, David died at the scene.
Oliver Karafa's sister Evita walks out of court after a bail hearing for her little brother. The 19-year-old sat in the prisoner's box before Justice of the Peace Mindy Average-Skapinker, wearing the same outfit he was wearing early Tuesday morning. That's when the Toronto man was arrested and charged with impaired driving and criminal negligence causing the death of his friend and fitness trainer, 24-year-old David Chang. Karafa's lawyer explains what will happen when the case returns to court on Thursday.
We are returning tomorrow for further evidence, and her worship will be considering her final ruling.
It was Tuesday around 2:30 a.m. when police say Karafa, who was traveling at extreme speeds on Mount Pleasant Avenue north of Eglinton, lost control of the 2007 Land Rover he was driving and hit a steel pole, smashing the SUV into 3 parts. Chang, a passenger, was killed instantly. Police allege Karafa was drunk. At the scene of the crash today, a growing memorial of flowers and notes, even the leather belt Chang trained in.
We definitely want to honor him in some way.
At Extreme Fitness Delisle, the general manager says Chang, a University of Waterloo grad, had worked here for the last 2 years. His death has devastated co-workers and clients alike.
5 years later, and after being released from prison, Oliver found Lucy. And for whatever reason unknown to humankind, she decided that this man was worth her time. Now, although we don't fully know what ventures Oliver was into, we do know that he was a dark entrepreneur with several criminal schemes. And this included him stealing, untagging, and then selling hot vehicles. Anyway, it was during the pandemic that Oliver wanted to start a new business in Europe which specialized in personal protective equipment. However, there was one problem here. He didn't have any money. And that is where Tyler came in. You see, Tyler on the other hand had a lot of money, and what's more, he wasn't afraid to say that some of that was gained through illegal activities. In short, he didn't mind that he sold cocaine. But with his baby now on the way, he aspired to be a more legitimate businessman and away from all of this negativity. and so he started to lend money instead. And so, after meeting through a mutual friend, Tyler invested $500,000 into Oliver's business. A father of 3 children, all under the age of 18, Tyler was described as a phenomenal father. He graduated from the Catholic St. Anne's Academy in Kamloops and was passionate about the Montreal Canadiens hockey team. His family and friends describe him as being continuously driven for excellence. Tyler launched a diamond company named Hard as Diamonds, and then went on to launch a weight loss and wellness supplement company named Elite Organic Nutrition. And, I mean, it kind of has to be said here, but cocaine aside, he was also working on a mobile app at the time of his death. In short, the main reason that he and Jordyn had moved to Ontario was actually to get into more legitimate businesses, because Tyler had had enough of the corrupt world. After being introduced to each other, Tyler and Oliver eventually got talking, and fast forward several months, they had grown to become good friends and business acquaintances. Apparently, they had met over 100 times throughout Tyler's investments. And throughout all of these weeks, both Oliver and Lucy had been spoiled by him with many gifts, including fancy watches. Now, although Jordyn and Tyler believed that his PPE business was doing extraordinarily well, the truth is that actually it was failing quite terribly. But Oliver would do everything he could to try and trick them, once showing them an image on his phone depicting $12 million in a bank account. Throughout their business dealings, the four never signed a formal contract, but Oliver continuously promised to do so, despite these promises ever materializing. He also began to stall with his monetary payments. He told Tyler that they had to travel to Prague and then open European bank accounts to better access the profits, because apparently wire transfers to Canada would be heavily taxed if they didn't. However, because this was happening in the year 2021, that was indefinitely delayed due to the border restrictions from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the truth is here that Tyler was never actually a dangerous man, and that, furthermore, he had never threatened Oliver over the borrowed money. But Oliver and Lucy automatically began to feel the pressure, and instead of getting over the situation that they put themselves in, they decided to double down and formulate a plan to murder him and his partner. So, the murder plan went something like this. Oliver initially baited the couple by claiming it would be easier to transfer money from his business and out of Europe through a life insurance policy, which, of course, could be set up through Lucy's wealthy mother. Lucy and Oliver then lured Tyler and Jordyn to a remote warehouse in Stony Creek, claiming it was the perfect place for them to expand their business into growing marijuana. Oliver boasted that he had several medical licenses, and that this would be the perfect place to do it. You see, Lucy's mother apparently owned the warehouse, and so no one would suspect anything. In reality though, he simply wanted Tyler to be in a remote location so he could murder him. Oliver then borrowed a gun from a friend, and asked him to stay in Lucy's apartment with both of their SIM cards. He also asked this friend to routinely use their SIM cards to make it look like they were still in the apartment. Now, this friend had no idea that they were planning to murder anyone. All they knew was that Oliver and Lucy were out on a, quote, super confidential mission. Oliver had also arranged to sell both his Audi SUV and Tyler's white Land Rover after the murders, settling on $4,000 for each vehicle because they were, quote, hot. On February 28, 2021, and at 1:13 p.m, Lucy and Oliver were spotted in the elevator going up to their shared apartment, indicating that they were at the property at the time. 2 hours later, at 3:33 p.m, Lucy was seen leaving the apartment in fake clothes, a hood, and a fake wig. Despite the effort, it very clearly was her, and although Oliver was not present at the time, it was determined that he likely took the stairs. At 5:07 p.m, Oliver and Lucy arrived at the warehouse on Arvin Avenue, and a quarter of an hour later, at 5:23 p.m, Tyler and Jordyn followed. That is when they were instructed to pull into the back of the property. But, you see, the warehouse was quite clearly locked, and no realtor was there to greet them either. It became apparent to the couple that something wasn't quite right. While Jordyn remained in the vehicle, Tyler stepped out and greeted Lucy and Oliver. The three of them then tried to access the warehouse, but with it being locked, they quite clearly failed, and Tyler started to get upset. And that is when Oliver suddenly opened fire at Tyler and then toward Jordyn. Tyler screamed for Jordyn to get away. That is when she shifted the vehicle into reverse and floored it out of the warehouse parking lot, but only after being shot multiple times. She remembers her partner's last words. It was, "Oliver, what the fuck, bro?" Jordyn sped down Arvin Avenue, where she then slipped in and out of consciousness. She then remembers crawling on the road on her hands and knees, asking for help from a driver who had pulled up next to her. That is when suddenly everything went dark. Over the next hour, Oliver and Lucy prowled the streets around this warehouse, desperately trying to find Jordyn, but no matter where they looked, they couldn't find her. And so, eventually, they gave up and fled the area. They eventually decided that, even if she did survive the escape, she would likely bleed out and die instead. I mean, what were the chances she'd find medical treatment within the next hour anyway? Well, actually, that is precisely what happened. And after Oliver and Lucy realized that she'd survived, well, they knew they were in deep trouble. And so, after realizing they'd be wanted for murder if Jordyn were to ever wake up from this coma, they decided to do something drastic instead. And by drastic, I mean flee the country. After the murder, Oliver and Lucy returned to their apartment before gathering their belongings. And then, at approximately 3 AM, they drove to a remote gas station and waited for it to open. When it opened at 6 AM, Lucy then went inside and dumped a black bin bag in the public toilets. This bag containing bullets, a hat, and her blonde wig. Next, they abandoned their vehicle, before then calling for a cab. Later that day, surveillance cameras captured Oliver and Lucy at Montreal Airport. And with all said and done, that is when they slipped out of Canada's airspace and made their way to Europe.
Hamilton police have confirmed 2 suspects involved in the homicide and attempted murder in Stony Creek last month have fled the country. Based on information, we believe 28-year-old Oliver Karafa and 25-year-old young Lucy Lou Lee boarded a flight from Canada to Eastern Europe approximately 24 hours after the murder of Tyler Pratt and the attempted murder of a second victim. We believe that Karafa and Lee are aware that they are wanted in relation to the incident and are actively evading police. Oliver and Lucy, if you're seeing this, we encourage you to turn yourself in. We are working closely with international authorities, and we are positive that our investigation will lead to your whereabouts. We will continue to relentlessly pursue you.
Unfortunately, the authorities had learned of their escape only just a little bit too late. Oliver and Lucy had fled to Frankfurt in Germany, before then driving to his native country, Slovakia, where they then retreated to his parents' home. Despite things being okay initially, Oliver's parents were furious when the news of their arrest warrants became publicly known. They demanded that both of them should leave the house immediately. But that wasn't without any assistance from his father, who actually sent them to a safe house in Hungary. And that is where Oliver and Lucy laid low for several weeks, protected by his father's acquaintances. For these 7 long, grueling weeks, they remained in hiding. But after learning that their international arrest warrants had now supposedly been dropped, they then decided to venture out into the world and travel to Budapest. However, yet again, it looked like the two had no common sense whatsoever, because soon enough, they were arrested while trying to obtain fake Canadian passports. After their arrests, Oliver and Lucy were then separated into their own prison cells and given their own lawyers. And this marked the beginning of the end of our 2 young lovers. Surprise, surprise, but after 3.5 months on the run together and going through so many obstacles, Lucy's loyalty slowly started to sway. In the meanwhile, Oliver pressured her to fight extradition and claimed that she'd be safer in Slovakia rather than Canada. But unknown to him, Lucy had already made a deal with her lawyers. The long story short is that Lucy promised to return to Canada on the agreement that authorities could only prosecute her on charges of murder. Which sounds pretty stupid to me, because murder could possibly mean life in jail. So why try to avoid all of the smaller charges? Now, Oliver was furious with her decision. Not that it mattered anyway, because he too would be shipped back to Canada, only without the same agreement. What's interesting is that during her interrogation, Lucy actually complained about her flight back from Hungary, citing that she normally flew first class and was not used to economy class or its bland food. And if you'd believe it, her mum even offered to fly all of them back first class if she was permitted to do so. Anyway, in January of 2022, Lucy was bailed out of prison on a $2.7 million bond. However, in May of 2023, and after breaching her conditions twice, she was re-arrested and put back behind bars. And 1 year later, in May of 2024, both she and her husband would stand trial. It is worth mentioning here that our modern-day Bonnie and Clyde both pleaded not guilty. During their trial, the court was given an overwhelming amount of evidence. Tyler's blood was found on the hood of the Audi Q5 that Lucy and Oliver arrived in, and on the center console of his own Range Rover. His blood was also found on a pair of grey tracksuit pants, which they had thrown away. Tyler's and Jordyn's DNA was also found on a pair of masks that Oliver dumped in a recycling bin at a general store in Port Carling. This is where police also found Lucy's abandoned Mercedes vehicle and the wig she wore in the surveillance footage. Speaking of vehicles, both the Audi and the Range Rover were also found abandoned and damaged following the shooting. And although Oliver planned to sell them at a discounted rate, they ran out of time when they decided to immediately flee the country instead. Paint transfer was analysed on both vehicles, which determined that the green paint found on the Audi was likely from a structure at the crime scene, and that white paint found at the crime scene was also likely from the Audi. During the trial, a forensic pathologist testified that Tyler would not have died right away, and it would have likely taken many minutes for him to pass away, with a lower limit of 2 minutes and an upper limit of 2 hours. There were 6 bullet wounds on his body, 3 which went through his arm, 1 through the back of his neck and out near his ear, another through a graze on his chin, and then, finally, the fatal shot to the chest, which struck his left lung and lodged into his back. Now, you won't be surprised to learn this, but Lucy's attorney argued that she was not aware of Oliver's intentions, and that, furthermore, she missed several red flags before the shots were fired. While on the stand, Lucy testified that she was on the other side of the warehouse when the shooting took place, and even went as far to say that she was perhaps the stupidest person in the world for getting involved with his business. She further justified her flight to Europe with Oliver by insisting that he had convinced her that their lives were in danger, and that Tyler's gang would be after them as soon as they learned of his death. As for the blonde wig in the elevator, she claimed that actually it was a fetish wig, and that, furthermore, she decided to wear it while running away from an argument, which is why she was caught on camera. Sure, Lucy, that makes a lot of sense. Jordyn strongly disagreed with Lucy's story, and claimed that Lucy was actually physically much closer when Oliver pulled his gun out. It was clear to her that Lucy was an accomplice and not a witness. Jordyn told the court, "We considered them to be really good friends. We just had a good relationship with them. I don't know what more else to say, because it's embarrassing that it was fake." Jordyn also testified that ever since being gunned down, she has had to depend on alcohol to numb her pain. She has lived with so much fear of being hunted down that she once crashed her car thinking that Lucy and Oliver's associates were after her. In addition to the nerve damage that she has suffered, she also suffers from PTSD and grieves daily for the loss of her partner and her child. However, Jordyn would finally bite back in court, telling Oliver and Lucy that they are actually the ones who have had their lives cut short, and that they are pathetic, scary monsters. After a 7-week trial, the jury took only 1 day to deliberate, ultimately finding both Oliver and Lucy guilty over the murder of Tyler Pratt. They would also find them guilty over the attempted murder of Jordyn Romano. Many cheers were heard throughout the courtroom when the jury confirmed its verdict, with Jordyn herself shouting "Bye Lucy" as she was led away. During this time, neither of the killers showed any emotion or remorse whatsoever, instead opting to stay silent as they stared ahead. With this being Canada and first-degree murder, both Lucy and Oliver have received life sentences with parole after only 25 years. And so, their only hope of seeing freedom again will begin in the year 2046, which, last time I checked, is quite a while away. Although their sentences provide justice to Tyler's family and loved ones, nothing can be done to bring him back from an unkind and cruel death. Sure, he may have dealt with cocaine in the past, which ultimately affects and harms the lives of many others, Murder was not the correct response to this. Already a father to multiple children, Tyler planned to improve his life by switching to more legitimate business practices. And unfortunately, through his own efforts to do so, he found his end. Lucy and Oliver threw this man's life away for a mere $500,000, money that was given to them out of trust. And in response, they betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. I hope that the family and friends of Tyler Pratt will find peace in their recovery. And I also hope that Jordyn will eventually get to a point where she finds happiness. And so, there we have it, the tumultuous, dramatic, and, quite frankly, unbelievable story of Tyler Pratt. You know, if anyone had told me this story over coffee, I would have quite literally told them they're lying, if not heavily exaggerating the details. But nope. Unfortunately, this is precisely what happened. I mean, we have political figures, shady business deals, international evasion, safe houses, and even a fetish wig. Oliver and Lucy really did see themselves as criminal masterminds. But alas, the two are actually quite stupid. And as for Lucy, well, I guess all of her brain cells must have gone to the other two triplets. This story still really baffles me, and Lucy really did have it all. In fact, both of them were born into wealth. Anyway folks, I think that pretty much concludes our case today. Before you go though, I'd love to know what you think about this wild story in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon here. Alternatively, check out my social media here. If neither apply, I'll just see you in the next video very, very soon. But until we see each other again, please remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and as always, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.